So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. This is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with my commentary. This week, in addition to the regular Big Six outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, I guess that's five, I'll also be using some quasi-news clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher to cover two big topics. This week's Syria deal and the 5th anniversary of the big economic crash here in the United States. Now, both the topics were covered on last Friday's Real Time with Bill Maher with guest Matt Taibi from Rolling Stone giving an analysis of whether the U.S. economy is safer, and I'll start you off right away with that clip.
Well, it's definitely a little bit safe. It's definitely safer, but it's also more interconnected and concentrated than it was before. I mean, what was our response?
It's more concentrated?
Yeah, absolutely. What was our response to the to the crisis? We took all these companies that we should have let go out of business, and we just merged them into even bigger and more dangerous companies.
You mean like Bank of America?
Yeah, Bank of America, Chase. Bear Stearns becomes Chase. So all those companies that were screwed up before, they're just bigger and more screwed up now. So it's even though the banks are better capitalized, it's less immediately dangerous. It's still tremendously risky, and the too big to fail question hasn't been addressed at all.
Go ahead. No.
I agree with virtually all of that. It is, I think, in the short run safer because of these banks have more capital, they're more able to withstand losses. We've done some stuff. We have got a more concentrated system, and we haven't worked out how to deal with too big to fail institutions. We haven't worked out a way of letting them unwind safely. So I think that's still a problem. But you also asked how
the verb unwind?
If they go out of business.
If they basically go bust, how do we deal with it without it?
Dodd-Frank doesn't deal with that.
There is a mechanism, but it's not tested, and nobody knows.
The panel agrees on that. Okay.
So I'll talk more about the U.S. economy 5 years after the crash a little later, but the first big topic I wanted to address is this week's Syria deal, and Bill Maher also covered that issue, making the comment about Bashar al-Assad I thought was kind of insightful in this clip.
And look, I am no fan of Assad, and I say that openly. I don't care if it costs me jobs in Hollywood. I think he is the worst kind of sociopath, the kind who commits unspeakable acts, but who looks like a shoe salesman at Macy's.
And I don't know how many of you watched Bashar al-Assad's interview on Charlie Rose. I watched the whole thing, and he was kind of a strange guy, and I think I'm going to be making a video about this. I said last week I was going to be making a video about why I came to be opposed to the airstrikes on Syria and why it took me so long, but the news has changed so fast, I don't even know if that video is applicable or appropriate anymore. I mean, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I think the video I am going to be making is taking some of the strange clips from Bashar al-Assad and mixing them together with some comedy clips and talking about whether Bashar al-Assad did a "that's what she said" in his interview, and whether it's appropriate to make jokes about a brutal dictator, and this I think is going to be the thumbnail. Bashar al-Assad, President of Laughs. I think that's going to be the thumbnail for my upcoming video. So watch for that. I think that's going to be up. It's almost done, actually. That'll be up probably in about 24 hours. But I want to show you some serious clips about the Syria situation. Let me just load up the next 3 clips here real quick. The next clip I want to show you, let's see, 4 or 5, is basically from Democratic Senator Robert Menendez from New Jersey, who's defending President Obama's policy on Syria and talking about the 2 goals of the Obama policy. If you've been watching my show for the last few weeks, you'll see that Obama has his 2 goals are basically stop the chemical weapons on one track, and possibly using military force, and then Assad should go, but that's through diplomatic pressure and negotiations. But anyway, here is Senator Robert Menendez on NBC's Meet the Press talking about the two goals of President Obama in this clip.
David, number one is I think I've heard the president say there are two goals. The immediate goal is the punishment of Assad, and in this case, if you can achieve giving up all of the chemical weapons and all the production facilities, then you've even gone beyond that, for the use of chemical weapons, and to send an international message that do not cross that line. And also, in my view, strategically sending a message, for example, to the Ayatollah in Iran, do not think about marching towards nuclear weapons. There is a consequence, or to the dictator of North Korea. The other one, independently, that the president has said, apart from the specific set of contemplative actions that he had, is that he has said that Assad must go. Now, that is through, hopefully, a diplomatic process. Part of the, when I say this is full of opportunities, if we could not only eliminate the entire chemical weapons program and eliminate all the chemical weapons, it might also create a foundation in which you could finally go to the negotiated agreements that Russia and the United States were going to pursue in what they call Geneva II. That's an opportunity, but there's a lot to go before we realize the opportunity. But I have heard the president say that Assad must go. Now, I agree with Senator McCain in this regard. Dramatically more assisting the vetted, moderate Syrian opposition is, I think, incredibly important to achieve the first goal. And I also hope that we will pursue Assad for war crimes. Even the comments of Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, are very significant. He's very reserved most of the times. The comments that he has committed crimes against humanity is something I'd like to see pursued.
So that was kind of an interesting analysis there from Robert Menendez about the war crimes thing at the end, but I wanted to show that because I think that was sort of the best explanation from any of the newsmakers on the Sunday shows this morning about Obama's two goals. In fact, I think it was even better than Obama gave an extended interview on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and I think he kind of misspoke. He kind of said he only had one goal, and I'll show you that clip here.
Mind that my entire goal throughout this exercise is to make sure that what happened on August 21st does not happen again, that we do not see over 1,000 people, over 400 children, subjected to poison gas, something that is a violation of international law and is a violation of
that won't happen again?
decency. Well, I think we have the possibility of making sure that it doesn't happen again.
So yeah, that's Obama kind of saying his whole goal is to stop the use of chemical weapons, and I mean, I think he said in this exercise, so maybe but I actually think he has the two goals there, and I think he kind of may have stumbled on a solution, and he had at least one Republican supporter, Representative Mike McCall, who is chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. He was, I think, one of the minority of Republicans who was willing to come out and support the Obama solution to the whole Syria crisis, and he, well, I'll show you a clip. He was talking about basically saying we have to hope that Obama got the right result, or anyway, I'll show you that clip here.
There in Texas, do you have any hope that this is going to work?
You know, we really have to, I think, as Americans. I think I've said from the beginning, the way to solve this crisis is to, the chief objective should be to secure and destroy these chemical weapons. Not picking sides. Both sides are not good actors. Assad's a dictator to use chemical weapons. Rebel forces have been infiltrated in large part by al-Qaeda factions. The key threat in the region are the chemical weapons themselves. And I think this is a step forward, if you will. It will not be easy. I think the devil's in the details, and as Reagan said, trust but verify. But we owe this, we need to do this because it can be done without a shot fired and hopefully without any American troops being put on the ground. And so we're going to take a look at this. I do think that Putin is in a unique position rather than the president to get this done because of his leverage over Assad and over Syria. Putin has now come forward as a leader, and he owns this now. And I believe that that gives us the greatest ability to get this thing done.
All right. What?
So yeah, that's the one Republican who I saw supportive of Obama this morning, and I especially agree with his last point. You know, a lot of the Republican criticism I've seen is that we've strengthened Putin, we put Putin in charge, but I think we've actually brought Putin in to take responsibility, which is more of a good thing. But I also wanted to show you some of the clips here of, and I see some people saying that there's some skipping. There's not really much I can do about that. If the broadcast isn't going completely, streaming isn't going completely right there, hopefully that will just right itself over time, but I can't really do much about that. I wanted to show you a few more clips. I have a couple Republicans here who weren't so accepting of Obama's solution. For those, you know, I guess I should explain for those who haven't really been paying attention. There's a deal now that Syria is going to have to identify all of its chemical weapons within like next week, and then start destroying them all the way through next year. So we'll see if that actually works out, but I actually think that that's a good solution. You know, it doesn't involve the use of force. I mean, I guess the devil is in the details, kind of like the Republican Mike McCall just said there. But I want to show you a couple of the Republicans who weren't as accepting of President Obama's solution. First, there's Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri. He seemed to want to use force. He just didn't like Obama's use of force or threat of force, and I'll show you that clip here.
Precisely what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
And this is not the president coming to us and saying, I'd like to do something in Syria. This is the president coming to us and saying, here are the two things I'd like to do. I'd like to do something that's incredibly small but consequential, whatever that means, and Assad will still be there when it's over. That's a different verification. As late as March of this year, I was for establishing a safe zone of some kind in Syria for the refugees and probably the insurgency. As the insurgency got more complicated, I'm not sure that that was still as viable in March of this year as it was a year earlier when I thought it was the right thing to do. But I didn't think what the president was proposing in such specific terms was the right thing to do, and I think it would have been a mistake for us to have a small attack that Assad was still said, look, the Americans took their best shot at me, which it wouldn't have been, but he could say whatever it wanted to be, and I'm still here. I think Assad's a lot stronger today than he was 2 weeks ago.
But
So yeah, there's one Republican criticizing Obama for strengthening Assad, which I don't quite get, and not using force in the right way. When I think when you use the threat of force to get a diplomatic solution, if it works out, the destruction of all of Syria's chemical weapons without the actual use of force, I mean, I think that is a good solution. And of course, if you really want to see a Republican opposing President Obama's Syria policy, I have to show you the clip from John McCain with sort of the most negative appraisal. Well, maybe not. I guess there are people even farther, people who are more anti-Obama on foreign policy than John McCain. But here's a pretty right-wing part of the Republican Party on wanting to use force and not liking Obama's solution in this clip from Meet the Press.
Be seen as victory.
It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of whether it will be enforced or not. When Mr. Lavrov said there is nothing in this agreement about the use of force, i.e., they will not agree to the use of force.
Okay,
no
so
matter
fair enough.
What Bashar Assad does.
Two points that I want to try to pin you down on is,
Sure.
which is if the Russians stand in the way, if they're gaming the president in the United States right now, and this is a waste of time.
They're in charge.
All right, they're in charge. So if they stand in the way of any potential force, what would you do as president in the interim, in case they do that, and if that eventuality happens?
Well, first of all, I would step up our support for the Free Syrian Army. The president 2 years ago said Bashar Assad has to go. Where is that statement? And I would give them the support that they need to change the momentum on the battlefield to lead to the negotiated departure of Bashar Assad. That has always been the goal, at least certainly stated by the President of the United States. Now there is no comment about that. Now he is able able to have killed 1,400 people, and he has killed over 100,000. Where is the United States response to that? And up until a few days ago, not one single weapon had reached the hands of the Free Syrian Army, except for some MREs whose time was about to expire.
Now, what's really interesting about that last part of the clip is where John McCain says up until a few days ago, not one weapon had reached the Syrian rebels from the United States. Well, that's a change in his talking points. If you watched, I think I may have shown it last week, or either that or the week before, there was a clip of him saying not one weapon has reached the hands of the Syrian rebels. And that's because even though months ago the Obama administration made the decision to start arming some of the rebels, the ones under General Idris, who were supposedly not connected to Al-Qaeda. It was only this last week that they started actually getting some weapons. I think are there anti-tank weapons? I saw some story about this. And they're also getting some non-lethal aid. So at least John McCain had to change his talking point there. But he is again from the part of the Republican Party that says that Obama is not strong enough on the use of force. Although there was an interesting clip on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos that had Republican Congressman Justin Amash, I think he's from Michigan, and he's part of the new sort of libertarian Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. He sort of led his Amash amendment a month or so back, came within several votes of defunding NSA spying, although it did fail, but he was the Republican who led that charge. And he had this interesting comment saying that the Republican Party, that the pro-war part of the Republican Party is now the fringe part of the Republican Party. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, I wanted to show you that clip here.
Colleagues John McCain, Lindsey Graham, harshly criticizing the agreement. They say they see it as an act of provocative weakness on America's part. We cannot imagine a worse signal to send to Iran as it continues its push for a nuclear weapon. You agree?
I don't agree. And increasingly, their views are the fringe views within the Republican Party. The Republican Party believes we shouldn't have gone to war. I think most Republicans believe we're in the right spot now in the sense that at least there's a process where we can get the chemical weapons out of there. And we haven't achieved success yet, but at least we're avoiding the bombing, and people back home do not want us to get involved in a war over there.
And Congresswoman.
So yeah, there he is saying that the pro-war part of the Republican Party is the fringe of the Republican Party, which I don't know, that's not the Republican Party that I recognize. But I also want to show you a couple more clips of President Obama's interview with George Stephanopoulos. Speaking of speaking of who is the pro-war party and who's not the pro-war party. I noticed that they talked a lot about how the Syrian deal will play with Iran, and you know what message Iran is going to get from whether Obama was strong enough or too weak. That was one of the things that the Republicans kept talking about, and I think the Republicans are definitely the bomb Iran party, and they have been for quite some time. President Obama actually made a little bit of news on that when talking about Syria, but he mentioned that he has kind of reached out to the new, more moderate president recently elected in Iran, and I want to show you that clip here.
In indirect ways.
Have you reached out personally to the new president?
I have, and he's reached out to me. We haven't spoken directly, but
letters.
Yeah, and I think what the Iranians understand is that the nuclear issue is a far larger issue for us than the chemical weapons issue. That the threat against Israel that nuclear Iran poses is much closer to our core interests. That a nuclear arms race in the region is something that would be profoundly destabilizing. And so my suspicion is that the Iranians recognize they shouldn't draw a lesson that we haven't struck to think we won't strike Iran. On the other hand, what they should draw from this lesson is that there is the potential of resolving these issues diplomatically.
So yeah, I thought that was an important clip from this morning's news shows that President Obama is actually trying to avoid war with Iran over their nuclear program and reaching out, and I don't know if that's going to end up being successful, but he also talked about how he's reaching out to Russia, and sort of with the old trust but verify mentality from Ronald Reagan. Oh, and before I do that, I want to show you, here is a clip of Ronald Reagan with Mikhail Gorbachev making that famous trust but verify statement. I'll show you that first in this clip.
Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is dovayai no provayai, trust but verify.
So yeah, there was a lot of references to trust but verify on the Sunday morning shows about this, applying it to this deal with Putin and Assad. And Assad, I don't think, has actually publicly accepted the deal. It's pretty much been worked out by Putin, so we'll see how that goes. And you can see President Obama in his interview with George Stephanopoulos referencing the trust but verify theme and talking about his relations with Putin in this clip.
Ronald Reagan said trust but verify, and I think that that's always been the experience of U.S. presidents when we're interacting with first Soviet leaders and now Russian leaders. Mr. Putin and I have strong disagreements on a whole range of issues, but I can talk to him. We have worked together on important issues. The fact of the matter is that we couldn't be supplying all of our troops in Afghanistan if he weren't helping us in transporting those supplies through the northern borders of Afghanistan. So there are a whole range of areas where we currently work together. We've worked together on counterterrorism operations. And so, this is not the Cold War. This is not a contest between the United States and Russia. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if Russia wants to have some influence in Syria post-Assad, that doesn't hurt our interests. I know that sometimes this gets framed or looked at through the lens of the U.S. versus Russia. That's not what this is about. What this is about is how do we make sure that we don't have the worst weapons in the hands either of a murderous regime or, in the alternative, some elements of the opposition that are as opposed to the United States as they are to Assad.
And I think that last part may be kind of the key to why Russia got involved. And I didn't hear anyone, I saw some people sort of hint to this, but I think Russia didn't want those chemical weapons falling into the hands of, the Muslim Brotherhood and some other extremists, and possibly ending up in Chechnya, because they have their own Muslim extremist problems Putin has to deal with in Russia. And I think that may be one of the reasons that he came to this deal. Now, I wanted to show you a couple more clips here from that George Stephanopoulos interview of Barack Obama. He wasn't always so nice to Vladimir Putin in the interview. He also, Vladimir Putin published an editorial in the New York Times this week that was kind of critical of the U.S. It was kind of funny because he was coming out against military action, even though he's been kind of a military interventionist in Chechnya and in Georgia. And he also, in that editorial, he talked about he never really admitted that Assad was the one who used the chemical weapons. So George Stephanopoulos confronted Barack Obama with that particular part of Putin's editorial, and you can see Barack Obama's response in this clip.
And President Putin has become your unlikely partner in this. And even in this op-ed, which has stirred up a lot of controversy here in the United States, he said there's every reason to believe that the rebels are the ones who use the chemical weapons. So does that tell you he's willing to lie to protect Assad?
Well, nobody around the world takes seriously the idea that the rebels were the perpetrators of this attack.
He wrote it in the New York Times.
Well, I understand. what I said is nobody around the world takes seriously the idea that the rebels perpetrated this attack. Now, what is true is that there are radical elements in the opposition, including folks who are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, who, if they got their hands on chemical weapons, would have no compunction using them in Syria or outside of Syria. And part of the reason why we've been so concerned about this chemical weapons issue is because we don't want those folks getting chemical weapons any more than we want Assad to have chemical weapons. And so the best solution is for us to get them out of there. But
So yeah, I think that part of the interview kind of supports what I was saying. It's kind of an oblique reference to those chemical weapons being used possibly against Russia in Chechnya. Although there was another interesting part of the interview where Barack Obama kind of made the distinction between having mutual interest with Russia, but Vladimir Putin not really sharing our values, which is kind of obvious, but I wanted to also show you that clip here.
I have said consistently that where the interests of the United States and Russia converge, we need to work together. And I talked to Mr. Putin a year ago, saying to him, the United States and Russia should work together to deal with these chemical weapons stockpiles and to work to try to bring about a political transition inside of Syria.
But do you trust he has the same goal? Do you really trust that?
I don't think that Mr. Putin has the same values that we do. And I think, obviously, by protecting Mr. Assad, he has a different attitude about the Assad regime. But what I've also said to him directly is that we both have an interest in preventing chaos. We both have an interest in preventing terrorism. The situation in Syria right now is untenable. As long as Mr. Assad's in power, there is going to be some sort of conflict there, and that we should work together to try to find a way in which the interests of all the parties inside of Syria, the Alawites, the Sunnis, the Christians, that everybody is represented, and that there is a way of bringing the temperature down so that the horrible things that are happening inside the country are continuing to happen. And I think there's a way for Mr. Putin, despite me and him having a whole lot of differences, to play an important role in that. And so I welcome him being involved.
So yeah, there's Barack Obama saying that he welcomes the involvement of Putin, even though he has different values. We have these mutual interests, and he can play this constructive role. And I think there is some truth in that distinction between values and interests, and getting Russia involved and taking some responsibility. And they can play. There's certain things they can do that no one else can do. And I noticed over on Face the Nation, they have a reporter in Damascus, Elizabeth Palmer, and she had some sources talking about what Putin may be doing behind the scenes to facilitate this whole chemical weapons deal, and I wanted to play that clip for you here.
There's a lot riding on this, and don't forget that the Russians really have the whip hand here. If they have said they're going to do it, they may be forcing a reluctant Syrian government and bureaucracy to get on with it. And there could be a quid pro quo in the background. Some of the Syrian officials will say to us off the record, there are real rumblings that the Russians have promised Assad a new anti-aircraft system as a compensation for the fact that he's going to be losing his chemical weapons stock. So we shouldn't be surprised if that emerges sometime in the weeks to come.
So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting tidbit there, because that makes me think that this whole thing might really happen if there's some quid pro quo where Putin is promising Assad new anti-aircraft weapons in exchange for giving up the chemical weapons. Then maybe Assad really is going to give up the chemical weapons, and that of course is the big question. But I also wanted to show you a few more clips on Syria. The first one, and hold on a second while I load up these next three clips. The first one is from State of the Union, which is also where CNN State of the Union, which is also where I got that old clip of Ronald Reagan saying "trust but verify," and I wanted to show you they had a panel that included Dr. David Kay, who was the guy who was responsible for looking for the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq after the U.S. went in there, and he raised a few, I thought, issues that might be problems for the success of this deal, with his experience doing weapons inspections, and so I wanted to show you that clip here.
Inspectors. It seems to me that there are very few countries that the U.S. and Russia and Syria would all agree upon to be a part of that.
Well, probably even fewer countries that actually have the technical expertise to do it.
It's us, right?
Well, it's us, the Brits, French, Germans, Russians, Chinese, essentially, that are available. You know, that's a problem with every inspector. I had Russians on my team in Iraq, and I think they performed very well. This is going to be a more difficult thing, primarily because of the Civil War and the fact that we're arming some of the rebels. So everyone who is an American is going to be viewed at least as a potential intelligence agent, a potential someone who's in favor of the rebels and doing things for them, as well as an inspector.
And
so yeah, I thought that was an important point, that there might be some problems with this deal because, you know, weapons inspections are difficult in any circumstance, and in the middle of a civil war, it could end up being impossible, and so that's something to consider. But I also want to show you a few clips in favor of this deal. One from Bob Woodward, who I don't really consider. I mean, I think some of the things he's done recently have kind of discredited him, and you'll see in this clip he also quotes Karl Rove, which doesn't give me a lot of confidence, but by the end he says something I kind of agree with, so I wanted to show you that clip from, I think it was from This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
In a sense, he tried all the policies. In other words, we're going to get Assad out. Oh, there's a red line if chemical weapons are used. Oh, we're going to strike militarily. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to go to Congress. And it was Karl Rove who always said you have to measure things like this by outcomes. And if you think about judo, using the power of the other side against them, by drawing Putin in and Russia in on this, it's quite, I mean, now they are committed to something that it may not work, it may take months or even years, but the result is a stabilization almost by accident.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that was Meet the Press, not This Week with George Stephanopoulos. That was NBC's Meet the Press with Bob Woodward on the panel. And he was saying what I had said previously about drawing in Russia and giving Russia responsibility and stumble into success. I mean, well, I guess we have to wait and see. But there are a couple aspects of this that, you know, I had said earlier that I wasn't sure I could make my video about why I oppose U.S. airstrikes in Syria and why it took me so long to come to that position anymore because of the changing news. But basically the three reasons that I opposed the airstrikes in Syria were one, because I thought we hadn't exhausted all non-military options, and two, because I didn't think we had enough multilateral partners and international support, and three, I wasn't convinced that the military action would actually accomplish the goal of the military action. And what Obama's done now will take care of at least two of those three concerns. And I want to show you from Fox News Sunday, Democratic Congressman Chris Van Hollen was making the point. The first point he was making is that the threat of force may have actually been what brought Russia and Syria to the table here, and that may be true. And I'm all for the threat of force more than the use of force. And well, I don't know if I'm all for the threat of force, but when the threat of force makes the use of force unnecessary, that is a good outcome for me. And I want to show Chris Van Hollen making that point on Fox News Sunday in this clip.
But look, there's a reason that the Russians went from vetoing every press release at the United Nations for 3 years, press releases that just mention chemical weapons, to getting Assad to get rid of those chemical weapons, at least put a plan in place to do that. The only factor that changed is that the president had the credible threat of force out there. Putin was sitting there powerless. This is his big ally in the Middle East. Powerless to stop a potential limited U.S. strike. And the answer is that he helped deliver to the president everything that we wanted. So it is a good result, as Mike said, finally dealing with those chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. But let's not kid ourselves as to why this happened.
To hear Rand Paul tell it was opposition.
Yeah, that last clip there, he of course had to say that Rand Paul said that it was opposition to use of force that brought Russia to the table, which is nonsensical. But I like that Chris Van Hollen point that possibly it was the use of military force that got this current solution. And if that's true, then I guess the threat wasn't all that bad. I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say I support it, but I do like this more peaceful solution. And Chris Van Hollen, and I'm loading up the next 3 clips here, but Chris Van Hollen also made another important point about how this solution not only did the threat of force possibly get Syria and Russia to the bargaining table, but if for some reason this whole thing fails, it'll make it more likely that the United States will get international support for the use of force, which was the second of my 3 concerns about the use of force. And I want to show you Chris Van Hollen making that point on Fox News Sunday in this clip.
So what the administration has said is that it reserves the right to move forward to enforce this in a limited way with U.S. action. I do believe, John, that now that Syria and Russia have said we're going to agree to this particular destruction of chemical weapons, it's much easier for the president to rally both international and national support behind that goal, because the Russians have now put this on the line, the Syrians have put this on the line. We have a clear objective. If they turn out to violate that, there are other ways we can
And I know that you have.
So yeah, there's Chris Van Hollen saying that it'll be a lot easier to rally support for use of force if Syria violates this deal after we've exhausted more of the other alternatives to force. And I said something about this on my LiberalViewer Sunday Live clip roundup last Sunday, where I actually talked about, I compared it to stand your ground laws, where I was saying that I think that we shouldn't view our use of military force where we need to stand our ground. It should actually be more like those states where they don't have stand your ground laws, where you have to exhaust all other alternatives before the use of deadly force. And I was kind of amused to see that Bill Maher made a joke that kind of made a similar point in his new rules section of Real Time with Bill Maher and HBO last Friday in this clip.
Forget the Syria debate. We need a debate on why we're always debating whether to bomb someone. Because we're starting to look not so much like the world's policeman, but more like George Zimmerman. Itching to use force and then pretending it's because we had no choice.
So yeah, that's the kind of the same point I was trying to make on Syria. And even though it doesn't look like I'm going to make a video, an edited, produced video explaining my position on opposing use of force in Syria, I think that basically does explain it, that I think we need to exhaust all options before use of force. I think we need international support, maybe not as far as Security Council, but at least regional partners. And I also think that it has to be effective to achieve the goal, which that I'm still not sure about. And I'm glad that, you know, it looks like this whole thing is going to be delayed, and maybe there will be this diplomatic solution. So anyway, those are the, I think it was almost 20 clips there on Syria, and The other big issue that I wanted to address, I showed you the Bill Maher clip at the beginning about the 5th anniversary of the big economy crash here in the United States. You know, it was the Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and there was all sorts of other, you know, it almost became a Great Depression here. One of the, I wanted to show you a clip not from the Sunday morning shows, but from one of my increasingly favorite news analysis shows, which is on weeknights on MSNBC. It's All In with Chris Hayes, and he had some kind of startling statistics about the recovery since the big crash 5 years ago, and those are going to be brought up in the Obama interview on This Week with George Stephanopoulos later. But first I want to show you Chris Hayes on All In with Chris Hayes last Wednesday, September 11th, in this clip.
A truly astounding statistic is making the rounds today, and rightly so. All right, listen to this. During the economic recovery, the top 1% of income earners captured almost 95% of all the income gains during that time. Just think about this for a second. 95 cents of every dollar that the recovering economy has generated into people's pockets has gone into the deep pockets of the top 1%. That's crazy. And if you look at the recovery specifically from 2009 to 2012, you'll notice that the top 1% saw their incomes grow by more than 30%, while the bottom 99% incomes barely moved at all, recouping less than 0.4%. Or, in other words, the top 1% incomes are close to full recovery, while the bottom 99% incomes have hardly started to recover. Add this to yesterday's Associated Press report that says the richest Americans earned more than 19% of the country's household total income last year, their biggest share since 1928. All this data paints a crystal clear picture of the rich getting richer, very much like we saw in the years that preceded the Great Depression and in the run-up to the big crash. This latest trend of concentrated wealth began in the Clinton recovery years. The disparity has only grown worse.
So yeah, there you can see Chris Hayes kind of laying out all the statistics showing that not only did the top 1% get, was it 95% of all income growth since the Great Recession 5 years ago, 2008, but it's part of this long-term trend where the middle class has basically been screwed, and it's really the ultra-wealthy that are getting most of the economic gains here in the United States. And over on, let me load up a couple more clips here real quick. But over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, George Stephanopoulos asked Barack Obama specifically about that 95%, about whether Wall Street is the winner of the recovery rather than any of the the general public, or your regular citizen. And well, first I'll show you the initial asking of that question on This Week with George Stephanopoulos in this clip.
Tonight, stocks plummet. The worst day on Wall Street in 6 years as one of Wall Street's largest investment firms goes bankrupt and another is bought out.
That was 5 years ago today when Lehman Brothers collapsed, sparking the worst financial crisis since the Depression. 5 years later, most Americans aren't convinced that we've recovered from it. And I challenge the president with that concern. 5 years out, let's take stock. I'm looking at the cover of Time magazine this week. It says How Wall Street Won. And we've got polls showing that 2/3 of the country still think we're going in the wrong direction, think the economy is no more secure. What do you say to those Americans who think Wall Street is winning, but they're not?
Well, let's think about where we were 5 years ago. The economy was on the verge of a Great Depression. In some ways, actually, the economic data and the collapse of the economy was worse than what happened in the 1930s. And we came in, stabilized the situation. We've now had 42 straight months of growth, 7.5 million new jobs created, 500,000 jobs in manufacturing, 370,000 jobs in an auto industry that had completely collapsed. The banking system works. It is giving loans to companies who can get credit. And so we have seen, I think, undoubtedly, progress across the board. The housing market has recovered. But what is also true is we're not near where we need to be.
So yeah, there is the beginning of George Stephanopoulos challenging President Barack Obama on whether Wall Street was the winner of the economic recovery. And if you, I'm going to show you a couple more clips from that interview on that subject. In the next one, you can see Barack Obama starts off talking about the long-term trends that have been crushing the middle class and explains some of the sources of that trend. And then George Stephanopoulos actually specifically mentions the statistic about the top 1% getting 95% of the economic gains from the recovery. And I'll show you that in this clip.
Part of it has to do with a whole bunch of long-term trends in the economy where the gains that we've made in productivity and people working harder have all accrued to the people at the very top.
95% of the gains to the top 1%. That is so striking.
It is. And the folks in the middle and at the bottom haven't seen wage or income growth, not just over the last 3-4 years, but over the last 15 years. And so everything that I've done has been designed to, number one, stabilize the economy, get it growing again, start producing jobs again. Number two, trying to push against these trends that have been happening for decades now. That's why we made sure that we had a tax system that was a little bit fair by asking people to pay more at the top. That's what the Affordable Care Act, healthcare reform is about, is making sure that folks who have been left out in the cold when it comes to healthcare are able to get healthcare. That's why we strengthened the entire banking system so that, too big to fail is far less likely to be in place if, heaven forbid, there's a crisis the next time. Because we've said, banks, you've got to double the amount of capital that you have so that you can absorb losses when you have them, so taxpayers aren't bailing you out. If you do start going under, you've got to have a plan, a living will, we call it, so that we don't have to come in and clean up after you. You're going to be on your own.
Okay, but you.
Now that's kind of different. That last part about getting rid of too big to fail is kind of different from what Matt Taibi said, and in the first clip I showed, from Real Time with Bill Maher, all the way back at the beginning of this broadcast, where he said that the banks are even bigger than they ever were, and even though they have twice as much capitalization than they used to, the plan for how they're supposed to fail has never been tested. So that's definitely a problem. But, despite all those things that Barack Obama has done, that still doesn't explain how the top 1% got 95% of the gains. And George Stephanopoulos kind of challenged Barack Obama with that statistic again, which I thought was good. And I want to show you that clip here.
Okay, but you do all these things and still 95% of the gains go to the top 1%. Do you look at that 4.5 years in and say, maybe a president just can't stop this accelerating inequality?
No, I think the president can stop it. The problem is that there continues to be a major debate here in Washington, and that is, how do we respond to these underlying trends? If you look at the data, a couple of things are creating these trends. Number one, globalization, right? Capital, companies, they can move businesses and jobs anywhere they want. And so they're looking for the lowest wages. That squeezes workers here in the United States, even if corporations are profitable. Technology. If you go to a lot of companies now, they've eliminated entire occupations because they're now robotized. We don't have travel agents. We don't have bank tellers.
That's bigger than Washington.
Right. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening in the marketplace. But if we have policies that make sure that our kids are prepared for higher skilled jobs, if we have policies that make sure that we're rebuilding our infrastructure, because a robot can't build a road, and we need new ports and a smarter electricity grid. If we're making investments to make sure that research and development continues to happen here, if we have tax breaks for companies that are investing here in the United States as opposed to overseas. All those things can make the situation better. It doesn't solve the problem entirely, but it pushes against these trends. And the problem that we've got right now is you've got a portion of Congress whose policies don't just want to leave things alone. They actually want to accelerate these trends. There's no serious economist out there that would suggest that if you took the Republican agenda of slashing education further, slashing Medicare further, slashing research and development further, slashing investments in infrastructure further, that would reverse some of these trends of inequality.
So I thought that was a great clip to watch there. It was Barack Obama not only talking about the long-term trends that are causing the middle class not to have their incomes rise, but also blaming the Republicans for being the obstacle to any sort of programs that would fix those problems. And for my friends on the left who say there's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats on the economy, I would point to that answer from Barack Obama as a very insightful explanation of what those real differences are. And I wanted to show you a few more clips on the economy real quick. This being the 5th anniversary of the big crash, I noticed over on Meet the Press they had Hank Poulson, who was the Treasury Secretary during the big crash, and he didn't really seem to address any of these issues. He just he was asked the question, are we better off now than we were 5 years ago? And he was pretty clear that we were better off, but didn't really address the problems that, some of the problems of income inequality. He just, I'll talk about it after I show you the clip right here.
We staved off collapse, but 5 years later, is the economy better off than it was?
Oh, that's an easy question. It's much better off than it was. We avoided a very bad fate. Things could have been as bad as the Great Depression. But today, the economy's growing at 2%. And although that's not enough, it's in many ways it's something we can take satisfaction in, given the amount of deleveraging that needed to be done, consumers and institutions. And capital markets are behaving as normal. We've still got some problems we need to address.
We still have some problems we need to address. And for those who don't understand what he means by the amount of deleveraging that needed to be done, that's getting rid of bad debts and bad bets by the Wall Street financial industry. That was bad debts, including bad mortgages. And I also want to show you a clip from another big player from 5 years ago, Barney Frank, who helped create the Dodd-Frank law that's supposed to fix this, that Matt Taibi was criticizing. And he addressed the question of whether there's still a problem with too big to fail 5 years later in this clip.
As Senator Elizabeth Warren said, look, the banks are 30% larger than they were. Too big to fail, she asserted, is still a reality. Could what happened 5 years ago happen today?
It could not happen in the same way. The biggest single cause of the problem last time, I think everybody agrees, was that mortgages were being given to people by institutions that shouldn't have given them, to people who shouldn't have received them, and then they packaged them and sold them to people who didn't know what was in them. There's only one prohibition in our legislation. It's mostly pro-market. It does not tell the financial community they can't do this or that. We do try to say, if you're going to take risks, you should be responsible if those risks go bad and have enough money to pay yourself off. But we banned the bad mortgages. I very much admire Senator Warren, but she's wrong if she thinks too big to fail isn't gone. Here's what the law explicitly said. And by the way, this was bipartisan, as this whole vote should have been, because Secretary Poulson was the one who suggested the basic approach. There are some large institutions that are too big to fail without taking account of the consequences. So what we have is the power in federal officials to step in, put those institutions out of business. As I said, I have one disagreement with Sarah Palin. She was right that we enacted death penalties a couple of years ago, but they're for big banks, not old ladies. And what happens is the bank is abolished. Some of the debts may have to be paid to prevent there from being contagion, but any penny that is advanced by law has to be recovered by the Secretary of the Treasury from the largest financial institutions in America. So what happened with AIG, what happened with other institutions, that cannot happen again. You cannot, if you are overly indebted, receive help from the federal government paying your debts and stay in existence.
Now, I think that was kind of a weaselly answer. You know, he said that they're not too big to fail in the same way. And he did sort of describe that there's this process, but it's kind of an untested process. And to remind you, here again is what Matt Taibi said in the first clip I showed, which I think kind of contradicts what Barney Frank said there.
Well, it's definitely a little bit safe. It's definitely safer, but it's also more interconnected and concentrated than it was before. I mean, what was our response?
It's more concentrated?
Yeah, absolutely. What was our response to the crisis? We took all these companies that we should have let go out of business, and we just merged them into even bigger and more dangerous companies.
You mean like Bank of America?
Yeah, Bank of America, Chase. You know, Bear Stearns becomes Chase. So all those companies that were screwed up before, they're just bigger and more screwed up now. So it's even though the banks are better capitalized, it's less immediately dangerous. It's still tremendously risky, and the too big to fail question hasn't been addressed at all.
Go ahead. No. I agree with virtually all of that. It is, I think, in the short run safer because of these banks have more capital, they're more able to withstand losses. We've done some stuff. We have got a more concentrated system, and we haven't worked out how to deal with too big to fail institutions. We haven't worked out a way of letting them unwind safely. So I think that's still a problem. But you also asked how the
verb unwind?
If they go out of business.
If they basically go bust, how do we deal with it without it?
Dodd-Frank doesn't deal with that.
There is a mechanism, but it's not tested, and nobody knows.
The panel agrees on that. Okay.
So yeah, you can see there the panel agreed that the Dodd-Frank system, in case they fail, is untested, and so there is still a too big to fail problem. And you combine that with the lack of income growth for anyone in the bottom 99%, and I think there are some real problems with economic recovery. I want to show you one more clip on the economy, and it's from this CNBC. I think she's an anchor. I think her name is Maria. Let me get it right here. It's Maria Bartiromo. And she said one of the, I thought, kind of the most disgusting clips on this whole economic issue, where she was saying we shouldn't concentrate on the evil of the banks, even though it's the evil of the banks that caused this whole thing. Anyway, I'll show you that final clip on this whole economic situation here.
You look at the favorability of Wall Street firms, still very negative, 42% on the negative side in our latest poll. As I talk to CEOs this week and bankers, they say, look, one of the issues is we have to keep so much capital in reserve now. There's not enough capital to invest. That ultimately hurts economic growth. We're not able to make as much money, make as many deals, and we have tremendous income inequality 5 years later. The cover of Time magazine, did Wall Street win in all of this?
You mentioned very important points. I agree with all that has been said. On the capital front, capital has doubled. Liquidity has doubled or tripled. I think the industry is in much better shape. We need to get beyond the conversation of, is Wall Street evil? Are the bankers evil and causing pain? And toward the conversation of, how do you create sustainable economic growth? That will answer the issue of inequality, because with growth comes jobs. So we need to come together and figure out how businesses, banks included, are actually going to spend that money. It's trillions of dollars on the balance sheet. You're right, they're sitting on it, but the idea that capital has been raised is absolutely a positive, not a negative, the fact that they have this in reserve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a positive the banks have more money in reserve, but the problem is that economic growth doesn't necessarily translate into job growth. That's been the problem with this recovery. There hasn't been, I mean, for incomes to go up, there has to be more labor scarcity. There has to be less unemployment, and that's just not happening. Most of the money is going into Wall Street profits, and the 95% of the income growth has gone to the top 1%, as I showed earlier, and that's why I really didn't like that analysis. I have a few more clips here before I get to the discussion part, where I'm going to look in the comments you're posting for the live viewers and try to get a little live discussion going on topic with the clips I've been showing. But after the Syria issue and the 5th anniversary of the economic crash and how the economy's going issue, those were the two main topics. But I also wanted to show you a few clips on this coming political battle between the president and the Republicans, and especially I think there's going to be this split in the Republicans. And first I wanted to show you, hold on, I'm loading up almost the last of the clips here, all but the last clip. First I want to show you the panel. This was on one of the Sunday morning shows where they all seemed to, they were discussing whether the Republicans' idea on defunding Obamacare as a condition for funding the government, that's basically what's going to happen sometime in the next few weeks. It's possible the Republicans may shut down the government if Obama doesn't agree to defund Obamacare or delay it for the next year. It's kind of a fringe idea, and it's sort of playing into President Obama's hands. And I'll show you a couple more clips on that. But first, here's the first let me show you. It's going to be a panel of. This is the panel from Meet the Press. It's Bob Woodward, Kathleen Parker, Anna Navarro, and Richard Wolff, all discussing this issue in this clip.
No one thinks they're going to defund Obama, not even the people who are pushing for it. And at some point, the Republicans are going to have to blink, and they're going to fund it. If they pass a bill that doesn't include funding for Obamacare, then the Senate won't pass the bill, and somebody's got to blink. We're not going to shut down government.
Folks, let's be, I think, fair to the Republicans here. It's not all Republicans saying let's shut down the government if we don't defund Obamacare. So I don't think it's fair to paint it as the Republicans, because the Republicans that have been here today, including John McCain, have been very much against this and saying it is
the
political
40
suicide.
extremists.
Yeah,
all right. That's who's doing it.
The insane caucus. What was it?
You used it.
Yeah. We'll leave it there. Thank you.
You're going to get a lot of flack from mental advocates, mental health advocates.
Never had that happen.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if they'll get flack from mental health advocates for calling the 40 Republicans who want to defund Obamacare as the insane caucus, but I thought that was an amusing clip. And there's also the last two clips I want to show you, show kind of the difference between Fox News and the rest of the media, I guess. Let's see. The first one is, and it has to do with this whole issue of whether they're going to shut down the government to defund Obamacare. It's going to be first that Republican Congressman Justin Amash over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos floating this idea that Obama should be in favor of delaying Obamacare for a year. Because he's, the Republican argument is that he's delayed the employer mandate for a year, so he should delay the individual mandate and the whole thing for a year. But of course, it's going to go into effect October 1st, and the employer mandate, putting that into effect, only affects like 5% of businesses, because about 95% of businesses who would be affected already offer health care to their employees. But the individual mandate, it's important to get it going, and it's only going to cost people, I think the maximum is like $95 on their taxes if they don't have health care the first year. I think it's close to that anyway. Excuse me, I'm hold on one second here. Gotta add one more clip in here. Yeah, sorry, I got to I'm getting a little parched. I got to take a Marco Rubio.
Rubio, Mr. Thirsty.
I love showing that clip. Trying to get that meme going. So, anyway, first here's Representative Justin Amash trying to. He can't even say with a straight face that Obama should actually be in favor of delaying his signature legislation for a year. Over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, in this clip.
Cuts.
Well, you have a strong faction asking for defunding Obamacare, though.
We're talking about delaying Obamacare for a year, and which is something the president has asked for with the employer mandate. So let's delay it for everyone. I think we're doing the president a favor if we delay it. The program is not ready to be implemented. If anything, the president should be asking us to delay it because it's better for him politically.
Does he see it as a favor?
I don't think so at all. I mean, you know.
So, like, everybody laughs at him when he says that Obama should be in favor of delaying his signature legislation, Obamacare, from being implemented, the individual mandate, because it is kind of laughable. But, of course, over on Fox News, you have Representative Tom Price making the same point, of course, without anybody laughing, and that's the last clip I want to show you here.
Obamacare. This administration has already delayed or waived fully a third of this legislation, and we believe that it's only fair for the American people now to have that same delay. And that's the proposal I believe that will be coming forward this week. That's the proposal that we support. We hope that some of our colleagues, Democratic colleagues in the House, support it like they did the delay of the individual mandate and the employer mandate. The bipartisan position here is to delay this law for a year. I'm hopeful the administration will come on board and that the Senate will see the light as well.
But again,
so, of course, over on Fox News, nobody's laughing when Tom Price makes the same proposal that Obama should favor delaying his signature legislation. So, anyway, that's the last clip I want to show you. I think I showed you like over 25 clips this week. I hope you enjoyed them. I want to go through and, it looks like I've got a lot of comments in the comment section here. So, I've got a few quick minutes here to try to get a little live discussion going. I always appreciate people who show up live to watch the show here. It looks like I've got something, is it like 80 people watching? So let me scroll through here, and looks like I've got a bunch of people commenting. You seem to be arguing with each other, but let's see, KZNO2 says, man, this Syrian situation isn't just dividing the political parties as usual, but the parties themselves. Yeah, that's one of the really interesting things, and that's one of the things I wanted to show with the different Republicans, and especially that clip from Justin Amash saying that the pro-war part of the Republican Party is now the fringe of the Republican Party. I've never heard anyone try to make that argument, and I think Justin Amash is kind of an up-and-coming star of the Republican Tea Party Libertarian wing. Yeah, that is interesting. And also the Democrats are split. I don't want to skip over that part, but there are a lot of, pacifist. There's the pacifist wing of the Democratic Party, and Obama was threatening the use of force. So let me see. I'm going to scroll through here, and I see you're arguing with each other. Red Pill Down says, I'm late to the show. Has LV mentioned any sort of evidence of chemical weapons? Well, I guess the only thing I really mentioned was that part of the Putin editorial in the New York Times where he talked about how it was possible that the rebels used the chemical weapons, and then I showed a clip from Obama responding to George Stephanopoulos mentioning that, and Obama said nobody really believes that. And I don't know, I kind of lean towards the evidence pointing to the Syrian government using the chemical weapons, but one of the big news events, the UN report on the use of chemical weapons is coming out tomorrow, and while the previous descriptions of this report had said that it's only going to say whether chemical weapons were used or not who used them, there are some indications that in the report there are going to be some evidence that is going to point to Assad, and there's that talk about Ban Ki-moon, the UN General Secretary, actually talking about Assad being guilty of war crimes. So I didn't really, I guess, talk about it that much so far, but that's kind of where I touched on it. Let me see, I'm going to be able to take one or two more comments here before I finish up, because I'm well over an hour already. But I hope Red Pill Down liked that answer there. You can go back, this will be a recorded show, and you can go back and watch all the clips later, and watch that clip about Obama responding to the Putin editorial and who used chemical weapons. Let me see, one or two more questions or comments. Let's see, Justin Smith says, Zed, the reason Putin denies they have weapons is Assad owes Russia billions of dollars. Well, Putin definitely, I don't know how much Assad owes Russia, but I know Russia has a big interest in keeping its influence in Syria. That's one of its biggest clients in the Middle East, and so however much money is owed, and I thought that was really important from that clip I showed earlier. Excuse me again, real quick.
Rubio, Mr. Thirsty.
I just took another little Marco Rubio there, but I think that was a really important point I showed in that Obama interview with George Stephanopoulos, where he said if Putin still has influence in a post-Assad Syria, that doesn't hurt America's interest. And I think that is why the U.S. and Russia may be able to make a deal in which Assad leaves power, because the United States is trying to keep Al-Qaeda influence out of a post-Assad Syria anyway, and so maybe they're trying to come up with some coalition where Russia will also have some of, the Alawites or some of the people who are all in the Assad coalition being in the post-Assad government, and Russia will continue to have influence. Let me see. And Justin Smith also asked, what do you think about McCauly raising the minimum wage? Of course, I think that's a great idea. I think the minimum wage is way too low. So I'm like way over an hour now, and so I hope you enjoyed the Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup. That it's a weekly show I do every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. So please join me again. And as I said, I'm also going to be making a video that should be up in about 24 hours or so, maybe even earlier, I'm not sure, right around, and it's about, it's going to be called Bashar al-Assad Does That's What She Said, and it will show some kind of strange comical clips from Assad's interview with Charlie Rose and address the issue of whether it's appropriate to make fun of brutal dictators, and look for it. This should be the thumbnail that I'll be using for that video, so look for that if you have a subscription. And if you don't have a subscription, press that subscribe button and subscribe to my videos. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed all the clips I picked out for you this Sunday. For those of my American viewers, I hope you have a good end to your weekend, and over in Europe and farther to the east of me, I guess it's the beginning of your week already. I hope you have a good beginning of your week, and I'll be seeing you around the internet. Thanks for joining me.